It's kind of the Wild West, honestly. In terms of morphs, it's nobody there. There aren't named morphs. It's pretty much
Okay.
just white collar, white hips, white on the body. But apart
Yeah.
from that, there are things. Just nobody has named them or claimed any sort of specific pattern of inheritance with them.
Hey, welcome back to a new episode of the Gecko Cove Connection, usually the Gargoyle Gecko podcast, but today we're mixing things up with a Chahua breeder, or Chahua. I don't want to get into that whole thing right now, but welcome Sarah from Rainy Day Geckos.
Thank you. Yeah, I still say Chahua too, because it's like GIF versus GIF. Like I've been saying Chahua for too long.
Yeah,
Plus,
no,
plus Chewie doesn't really work with Kahua so much.
right. No, they're Chewies to me. Like we shorten everything. We're both in the U.S., so we got to shorten it. That's why everybody, nobody calls me Robert. Everybody,
That
everybody eventually
it
calls
has
me
to be
Bob
short
or
and
Bobby.
cute.
Exactly. So no, that works. And these guys are kind of small and cute anyway, so we got to give them a short and
Exactly.
cute name. Very fun. Well, I'm really excited about this episode because I've done quite a few Gargoyle Gecko podcasts, and I've had just Gargoyle Geckos. I've owned Chewies for a hot second and sold them, and I've owned Leashies for a hot second and sold them, and I've owned a Crested Gecko for a hot second and sold them. I do want to eventually get back into Chewies. I'm very interested. Part of the reason why we started talking. But what's fun about today's episode is that I don't know anything, right? Most people that I have on, I've learned so much about gargoyles that, I have to kind of hold myself back from saying how I do things, right? But in this episode, guys, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. So Sarah's the full expert. So I'm so excited to be speaking with you and getting to pick your brain and ask you questions. So thank you again so much for coming on. Well, so let's start off with, and kind of get this out of the way. How did you get into breeding geckos in the first place? Did you start with Chewies? Because they do have quite a price point of entry, which
That's
is usually why
true.
people don't start with
I
them.
did not start with Chewies. I started with crested geckos, like a lot of New Caledonian gecko breeders do. Um, I've always been into reptiles, but in terms of the geckos, I got into them actually in kind of an interesting way. I was at my animation school learning animation, and we had
Oh, that's
a
cool.
project that I was like my junior, sort of my junior final project, and I was creating this creature, this character that was kind of amphibian, kind of lizardy, and I just couldn't get the walk cycle right. So I was struggling one day, and the professor's partner was like, "Oh, well, I could bring a crested gecko in. They're cool, and they move kind of like this." And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." And then she brought in a crested gecko named Mocha, and
Nice.
I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I totally fell in love with it, and we became like really good friends. And then turned out she was a breeder. She had
Oh,
over a
nice.
hundred geckos, and I went over to her house, and it was like Candyland essentially. And it was like I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm gonna get these and I'm gonna breed them. So I ended up getting one from Petco actually. Sorry to
Yep.
say, but she had like
They're good gateways.
she had dropped her tail and had one bad eye, so she was like 50% off, and I loved her
The
pattern, and she
discount
was my
baby.
favorite. Yeah, she's been with me, and she's still like still with us and still happy and still doing great.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's where I started, and then as far as Chewies, my first one again was the same friend. I offered to gecko sit for her when she was on
Hmm.
vacation, so she brought like 10 or 15 geckos over to my apartment, and one of them was a baby Chahua, or like a kind of a young a young Chahua, and I
Yeah.
was dealing with all their crusteds, and they were jumping all around, and then I take out this just unbelievably soft little baby Chahua, and it just sat there, and I was like, okay, we'll
Wait,
just
you're not
hang out,
crazy?
and we just hung out for like 2 hours while I was doing my homework and such. And I was like, these are magical. These are special. There's something about them. They're just so calm, and like the way they look at you, they're like looking at you. They're recognizing, things. You can see the wheels turning. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so many people
I
have
just
told me
went
that they're
like,
intelligent.
they're so smart
Yeah. So
for
okay.
geckos. I
So
mean,
well,
but yeah.
right. They're not gonna solve black matter or anything else like that. But but for reptiles, everybody that I've talked to that it's in love with chewies, which is a lot of breeders. A lot of gargoyle breeders I've talked to have a little batch of chewies, right? And that'll probably be me one day because even if it's not your main project, there's something very attractive about them. I'll be honest with you. When I started looking at new Cal species, I was watching Clint's reptiles and going back and forth. Do I want to get, a gargoyle? Do I want to get a chewie? Do I want to get a lychee? At that point, I liked crested geckos. I thought they were really cool looking, but I saw the market was a little saturated, and I wanted to make a little business out of this. So those were my three options. And I remember watching those videos back to back to back and going, all right, which one is it? And Chewies were definitely my number one choice until I looked at the price point, to be honest with you. So how long did it take you so what year did you get your first crested gecko?
2012, 2011, around there, a while
Oh,
ago.
really? Not
Yeah.
that long ago. Wow. Okay, you're impressing me even more with how far you've come in that short period of time. So I'm gonna admit something. I totally, if you're watching this and you watched the beginning, I like halfway through our conversation when you said you got your first gecko and what year did you say? 2012.
2012, 2011-ish. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm having a hard time in my old age understanding time. 2012
Oh,
seems like it was just 2 years ago,
yeah.
right?
I know that feeling.
And I'm like, oh man, you've only been doing this for 2 to 3
Oh
years.
man,
You're
I would.
killing it. Like I started about that time.
No.
So when I made that comment earlier, I was a complete idiot. I'm like, wait, she didn't mean 2022.
No, that would. Yeah, I've gotten. I think I'm on like generation 4 or 5 of geckos produced in house.
Yeah.
If that gives an idea of how long it takes per one.
Yes. No. It makes way more sense. I just was
No,
an
I totally
absolute
get that.
bonehead. Maybe it's because we're recording this later on at night. And I just laughed because I made that comment, and then you were like, "Yeah, this gecko is, a next generation." I'm like, "How could you?"
Well,
No,
that's
you
not how
put
time
3
works.
years in between.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all a
So
bit
anyway,
messed
try
up
to be
after
some
COVID in terms
transparent
of
here.
what is even time.
Time. Oh, I love it. Yeah, I need the school year to end. It ends in 2 weeks for me, so I love it. So then, when did you get your first Chewy?
I think it was probably about 2013 that I got my first
Okay.
one, and I got it from Michael Panone, Chahua Chamber. Um,
Awesome. A great place to
and
get it, right?
yeah, he's the gecko that I got is he's a little bit feisty, but like still really smart and still really fun to play with and handle. Yeah, and
Awesome.
I went from there, and I know the price is sort of a deterrent to some people, and I mean, definitely for the casual person trying to get their
Sure.
first gecko or their first reptile, but like the thing I always tell people about the prices that these guys live, 20, 30 plus years. They live a long time.
Right.
That price over that period of time, the difference between that and like, a medium to high end crested gecko is pretty much nothing, especially in the current market. You can definitely get, if you want a mainland or you want like a low, they say lower quality, but they're all great.
Pet
But
quality.
a pet quality one, you can find them for 400 to 600, which is about the range that you could find gargoyles and crested geckos as well.
Exactly.
So they're really kind of in that that same range. It depends on how picky you are.
Right. I think, when it comes to, like you said, that entry level pet quality, it's become very manageable to get into them. You're not going to get the $200 or, kind of thing you can get with crested geckos. But once you get into the higher end, so like with gargoyle geckos, right now where I'm kind of at, where I'm really picky and buying my next gecko, it's going to be a breeder, right? I'm not going to buy anything that's not a breeder at this point. So, if it's under $1,000, it's probably not for me, right? Which sounds crazy. If I would have told myself that 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, "What? Are you kidding me?" Right? But then I would say, a $3,000 gargoyle or a $6,000 gargoyle is like top of the line, right? They're not getting very much higher unless it's a full adult. Whereas, you look at the Chahua market, and I've seen stuff for $13,000. Not all of them are that expensive, right? $3,000, $4,000 isn't unheard of, and I think that's kind of a cool thing where it gives you longevity in the kind of breeding game, where because they're not so easily accessible, when you're in that market, it could be a nice long term investment.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you can make, I mean, if you're lucky and you're patient, you can
Hmm.
produce like you said, a $13,000 or more quality gecko from parents that are you purchased for like 1,000. Like, it is
Yeah.
possible, and I that's how we built kind of our business, because I started with this is one of my earlier productions. We produced him
Hmm.
here. This is Tiger Eye. He's one of the two of Moonstone and Tiger Eye that are one of our most well-known pairs, and have
Awesome.
produced some of our nice animals. And obviously he's nice, but he's not like, you wouldn't see him and go like, whoa, that's insane. I can't believe it. And his parents actually have
I
even
love
less
them.
white than this. I love him. Oh, he's so sweet.
Yeah.
And one of the fun things too is that they actually pass their personality on. I find
Ooh,
a lot of the
okay.
time. So
I like that.
calm geckos seem to make calm babies. Skittish geckos seem to make skittish babies, I found. Not always, obviously, but
Sure.
that's a pattern I've noticed. But yeah, you
Uh,
can make
I don't want
like,
to pass that up because I love that whether it's a theory or you're proving it out. Because when I first started, I come from the world where of dog training and sort of mammalian behavior, and I'm also a counselor, so human behavior, right? And I don't want to project that onto a gecko, but there are some general rules with animals, and if you look at the domestication of dogs, or you look at the domestication, if you ever saw the study of domestication of silver foxes in Russia, that's an awesome study. Go look it up if you haven't
oh
heard of
yeah,
that. But I basically they domesticated them within 4 or 5 generations by taking parents that were less and less skittish and aggressive, and basically changed them over time. And so I feel like that could be something, especially when you're talking about Chahua, especially lychees. When I first was looking out for lychees, people were kind of like, "Really, are you asking if the parents are aggressive or not, or cage aggressive?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want a baby. I don't really care what it looks like. I wanted it as a pet. I wanted a baby from a pair of geckos, like you said, that the parents aren't, super territorial, or ones that anybody could go pick up, and that's also conditioning." But I love that theory. You just made my day.
yeah. I mean, I think people don't talk about it a lot.
Hmm.
They talk about the outside, the beautiful colors, the beautiful patterns, which I'm such a sucker for. Obviously,
Yeah.
I love. I mean, that's why I love genetics. I love all that stuff. But
Yep.
in terms of what's so appealing about them is just, I mean, their personality is the best. Like,
Hmm.
so we really place a lot of importance on, like, not only hand rearing and sort of handling the babies from a young age, but also it just seems like some come out calm. They, like, from the moment that they hatch, I have
Yep.
videos of them. I have videos of hatchlings coming out and investigating my hand and arm for the first time, and some of them will be like, "Oh yeah, no, this is totally fine," and then some of them are just spinning and like so
Yep.
it's and so you notice like over time, like, wait a minute, these the babies that come out of this pair are like 99% so super calm, and then
Hmm.
like I had another pair that I've stopped breeding that it was kind of a 50-50. You didn't know necessarily, and they were a little bit more, just a little bit more skittish and took a little bit more work, you know.
Sure.
But it's obviously not not anything you can necessarily
No, it's not
say for like
definitive,
a
but
hundred percent certainty, but it's something that we've noticed, and I think we care about because people are getting them as pets, as part of their family, and it's nice to get one that is fun to handle and
yeah.
seems to not be stressed by it.
Absolutely. Yeah, not being stressed by it, and just the fact that, again, we can't predict, exactly how they're all going to turn out, right? It's nature and nurture. But the more we can try to influence that, where maybe they'll have a longer home because, they're not this crazy nut of a gecko that's
Mm-hmm.
scaring their owner to saying, hey, I can't handle these things, right?
Yeah.
Where breeders don't mind as much, but I think if we do focus on that a little bit more, we could influence. Maybe not change completely, right? They're not domesticated, but over time, maybe new traits would come out that way. Going back to that study in Russia, right? After so many years of them being domesticated, they got the curly tail like dogs. They started getting different color patterns. So maybe that's a key to unlocking new morphs. Who knows?
Yeah,
I'm just
that I
guessing.
have no idea.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Stuff
it,
we can kind of bring from other areas. So,
yeah, it
okay, I
could
want
be
to pick
that
your brain
genes are
on
locked
morphs.
together. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't understand, we don't have their genome mapped out yet. Um, so let's talk about morphs because with crested geckos, I mean, there's so much to talk about with it, right? A lot of new things have popped up in the last few years. With gargoyles, you've basically got your reticulated and blotched, and then you've got your stripes, right? And then kind of a few things in the works, but nobody's really come out definitively with anything as far as different phenotypes. With Chewies, from what I understand, right, you've got the two different locales, which is debatable whether they're separate or not, which we can get into in a little bit. The mainlands and the Pine Islands. Pine Islands are probably more sought after. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, we breed exclusively Pine Island.
Yeah. And so with that, I know the white collar and the more white, the more desirable. Are there any? What kind of other morphs are people? When you're looking at your projects, right? Is it just white collar, non-white collar? Is it like I don't understand? How do you categorize Chahua?
It's kind of the Wild West, honestly. In terms of morphs, it's nobody there aren't named morphs. It's pretty much
Okay.
just white collar, white hips, white on the body. But
Yeah.
apart from that, there are things. Just nobody has named them or claimed any sort of specific pattern of inheritance with them. There can be
Okay.
a stripe down the back, for example. We have a lot that come out with a pretty strong back stripe. Some will
Hmm.
have big blotches, just like blotch, blotch, blotch down the back. One of the projects I'm the most excited by that I'm personally working on, and I don't know anybody else who's working on this, is my swirl project. Um,
Okay.
and it's there are he's maybe not the best example. I actually have a swirl gecko over here that I can show you, but on
Sure.
their back they have patterns, and I like to work with these because I think that's like just one of the ingredients to what could make them look more cool, like more interesting, like
Yeah.
what oh, people pay attention to white, but there's so much more than that. So the swirls I noticed on a particular female I have named Jade that I got, it was one of my first geckos, has these very almost they almost look man-made, just perfect swirl pattern, like a rug, um, in these like almost flowers down the back. And I was like,
That's
that is
cool.
super cool. Can I enhance that? So I got I've got some babies that came from her that have a really strong swirl pattern from her. Um,
Hmm.
and I've
So
paired
she's
them
reproducing it.
to a female that I got from Darnell, who I was like, oh, she's got some geometric looking swirls too. And I got this baby that has just some amazing patterns, just like I was hoping for. But that's just my
That's awesome.
personal project. I don't really know what other breeders are working on. There's obviously colors. There's base colors.
So yeah, what are
And we could
those
talk about
those
those.
the main base colors? Yeah, what are they? I know there's what reds. I've seen pinks, pastels, greens.
Yeah, so I mean they're not even really named because there's
Okay.
red, there's like pinks, kind of like
Hmm.
mauvey kind of colors,
Yep.
peach, orange. I've even seen gold sort of colors. That's really rare and really unique. I don't see many of them that have that kind of like almost orangey, like yellowy color.
That's
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
and greens are interesting. I think I found with Chahua there's a base color and then there's
Hmm.
green, and sometimes it seems like green, the whole gecko is green, but
Yeah.
green is the only color I've seen shared with another base color on Chewies, and greens come in last.
Hmm.
So they develop around like 3 years of age. They start getting their
Okay.
greens in. Like, I mean, they can get their greens in a little earlier, but like they'll continue to develop, and sometimes the green will cover the white as well. So green is a little bit
I've seen
different.
that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it
because
acts different than the base color, which is usually, going to be some form of peach, brown, gray ish kind of mauve, all those kind of colors. But sometimes you can get just a pure green. Uh,
well, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Can the base color also be green, where it's green on top of green? Because the one gecko that kind of caught my eye recently, there was a video done where there was a tour at Brian Susan's facility, right? He was showing off his Chahua and a bunch of other animals, and he had this one gecko. I reached out to him like, "What is that?" Like, I knew it was a Chewie, but I'm like, what's the price point on kind of something like that? Because it was just the whole thing was bright neon green, and it's not that muddled kind of tree green. It was like neon. And I was like, that is so cool.
the first Chewy I got, the one that I got from Michael, is neon
Yeah,
green, and he is awesome. His name is
yeah,
Malachite. Yeah, I might have him on my Instagram, but yeah, he's
yeah.
super neon. And I don't have I don't have the luck to have produced any neon greens myself. Although the greens
Hmm.
that I produce tend to be more of your standard sage or forest or kind of just a green, just a standard green,
Yeah,
not
we,
like
we
a
got to get out our
bam
Crayola
neon.
box, and it's one of those things where there's so many shades with these animals that you can't just use the word green, blue, red. It's there's different shades across the spectrum. It's so cool, and I guess when you're breeding your different geckos together, a lot of breeders, for again, I'm going to refer a lot to the gargoyles because that's the world I live in, but like I've talked to breeders where a lot of people breed like to like. So if you got a stripe, you breed it to another stripe. You got a blotch, you breed it to another blotch. And everybody's going for red for the most part. That's changing. But with Chewies, do you typically pair up just randomly, whoever gets along? Do you pair up based on just is white the main thing most of the time, or like you said, the swirls, you're pairing two geckos with two swirls, so again, like and like, to try to enhance that and reproduce it. And do the babies always come out that way, or is it really polymorphic where you've thrown some random stuff?
It's really polymorphic. But what's it depends on what you're going for. I think that's the thing is like that's why I was like it's kind of Wild West because there's no like people out there being like, oh, you need to pair, like sometimes people say with crested geckos, like, oh, you need to pair yellows with either yellows or lavenders or blacks. Don't pair them with reds because they'll get muddy, things like that. But there isn't really
Right.
anything like that with chewies, so people will just pair usually like with like, but one of my like most exciting pairs to me is I deliberately paired Opal, who's super white, one of the whitest females I've ever produced, but she has the base color that is there is like a dark maroon red and
Okay.
green. So it's like really like pops. And I put her to a male that is like super pink, really pale because I'm thinking, is there some kind of hypogene that causes the pinks and the pastels and all that? And I like to try and pair anything like that with like a darker animal and see like, will this brighten it up? Will this like
Yeah.
will I be able to get the vibrancy of this animal and the white because they both have high white, but she's like really high white. I was
She's
like,
got the extra
what I
punch.
want to get is like a mix of exactly these two things. So I'll tend to be like, can I get this and this on the same gecko? And
Yeah.
sometimes you're lucky and then you do. So that's that's how I tend to pair my animals. But I do have a pair that I'm pairing this year that we just got eggs from that is going to be like a really red gecko with high white and black, and another really red gecko with high white and black. And I'm like very excited to see what they make. But yeah, I mean, you can get. I've gotten just all kind of colors from the same pair, especially if you pair two different colored geckos, two different base colored
Mm-hmm.
geckos. It's like you usually get a wild mixed bag of colors
Yeah.
from them.
It's a bag of Skittles.
Yeah, I like
Right?
my Moonstone and Tiger Eye pair. You see Tiger Eye is just he used to be like a super vibrant kind of orangey color, but he doesn't fire up much
Okay.
these days. He's fired down because he's so chill. And she is a bit more pastel, and they produce a lot of apricot, like orangey pink, and just really vibrant geckos because his base color uh, is pretty vibrant, and hers is kind of a little bit more muted. So
Mm-hmm. So it's right in between.
yeah, it's interesting. Um,
That's so cool.
let's see, I can show
Yeah.
you. I have an opal
Yeah. Please.
baby over here to show you that mix between them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I don't know if this one's fired. Probably not fired up. I fed them crickets hoping that they would fire
Never
it.
work
But...
with animals or children on TV. You know.
oh,
Yeah, he is chill. I mean, he's like a bearded dragon chill.
yeah.
I don't think any of my gargoyles would do. Maybe Bimini. That's about it.
So this,
That is
it's really
gorgeous.
hard
Look
to
at
see,
that.
but this one has almost like a golden orangey
Oh,
kind of
wow.
base
So that's
color
his
with the
baby.
white. This isn't his baby. This
No,
is
okay.
so Opal is yeah, I don't Opal is his sister. So
His sister,
uncle, I
okay.
guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That
Um
is gorgeous. I mean, obviously high white, so everybody's off after that, but just
but
stunning.
you can't really see it on camera and also they're fired down. But their base
Hmm.
color is vibrant like the dad, which is has this beautiful almost ice cream pink kind
Ooh,
of
okay.
coral. It's so pretty
I'm
color.
gonna have to pull him up on Instagram in a little bit. Well, that's one thing. I was, talking to my wife. I'm like, hey, do you want to get involved in this and kind of join me in the hobby? And she's like, if you can find me a pink gecko, because her favorite color is coral, right? And I'm like, you're mentioning it. Maybe this is my way in. Who knows? Uh, so
Yeah, there you go.
that
I
is
mean,
awesome.
we started with pink geckos. I started with pink crested geckos because that was like my favorite crested gecko color. Apparently,
Sure.
very hard to make, but that was
Yeah.
that was what I
Hey,
started with, and that's
nothing wrong
why
with expensive
my
taste.
company color is pink.
I love
Because
it.
yeah, we think
That
it's really cool to be able to have
it's a
a
beautiful
pink
color.
gecko.
Yeah, I gotta find one. All right. So, how many geckos are you running right now? How many pairs?
Oh man, I it's not that many.
Just
We keep
Chahua.
it small. So let's
Good.
see.
That's how I like it too.
One, two. I think we're doing 5 pairs. Like
Okay.
we keep it real small. Um,
Sure.
I have about roughly probably 80 geckos total across all of my crested geckos and Chahua, and I have a fair number of
Okay.
cresties. We're doing a couple of cresty pairs this year, like three pairs. So far, I only have one crested
Okay.
egg, so I don't have as much.
Everybody's talking about how hard of a season they're having
I'm
this
having
year.
a good season with these guys. I just
Yeah.
everyone says, oh, crested geckos breed so you'll be drowning in eggs, and I'm like, I have females that lay one egg at a time, like
Oh,
several
geez.
females that only lay one egg. So I get like maybe 5 eggs in a season.
Who knows? Maybe in like a year or so, we're gonna have the great crested shortage.
Yeah, it could
Like,
be, or it's just me. I mean, I have luck with these
oh
guys, and a
no, it's
lot of
not.
people don't. So I feel lucky that I'm able to
Yeah. No.
have luck with them. But
I well, if you got too many, we're gonna work something out. So don't worry. I'll help you. You know, take some babies. So, but yeah, I'm having a great season this year. It's only my second year, and I've got. Well, I was running 4 girls. Now my fifth girl just finally laid her first set of eggs a few days ago. So I've got between 5 girls. I've got 10 eggs already hatched, and I've got 14 eggs in the incubator.
yeah,
So I'm feeling pretty lucky this year.
that's about where I'm at. Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we're doing okay this year. I'll take it. All right, so you've got a relatively small collection of Chewies. I'm guessing you keep them one-on-one pairs.
Yeah, they do
Okay,
pretty great paired up. We
yeah,
only split them up if they need a break, or if they, if we want to change up our breeding plans, which is pretty rare. Like usually, if something's working, I like to keep them together, unless they're
sure,
not producing things that I'm into. But
right.
I found that when you pair them up and then you split them up and then you pair them with a different mate, they tend to be like, so they don't seem to
We
do
just
as
had it
well.
down.
Yeah, so I tend to
Oh,
keep
that's
them
great.
together unless there's a fight or they need a break. And fights
Uh,
have happened, but
yep.
we
So
haven't
okay,
lost
when you're
anybody.
pairing your geckos together, how much danger do you feel like there is with Chewies? Obviously, they can fight, they can tear each other up, but at what point do you know? All right, these two are getting along. Like, how long does that take?
Um, a few days, I would say. Like we before we pair them, before we pair a new pair, we will
Yep.
swap furniture. So like
Okay.
I'll take maybe some of the leaves or like a piece of cork bark from each and swap them over and let them get used to the other's smell. And so far, that's worked for most of every pair, except for one this season where the female had been paired to another male that she had bonded with, but then I ended up selling, and now
Okay.
she's with a new male, and they kind of don't don't hang out in the same spot in the cage. She's clearly not gravid, so they're kind of roommates at this point. But
Fair
usually you
enough.
can tell that they're into each other because they will sit near each other. They'll sort of sit near the glass next to each other or even on top of each, not on top, but like sometimes like one will
Yeah,
be
like
sitting
partially on
kind of
top.
like,
Yeah.
and it'll be like a T intersection. They'll be sitting just kind of usually the female, if she's coming up to the male, like you can tell that they're doing well. Um,
That's
and
awesome.
if you watch them and they're gentle with each other as they're kind of climbing on are all around each other, then you can tell that they're doing pretty good. But even then, things can happen. We've had pairs that have been paired with each other for years, and then they had a spat one night, and we had to split them up, at least temporarily. You know,
Okay.
because things can happen. A
Did
stray
most of those
cricket.
make up after that, or?
Um, I mean they probably would, but I've kept that particular pair that I'm thinking of separate just because we've produced a lot from that pair and I wanted to give a couple other newer pairs a shot this season. But yeah, I would
Sure.
try and pair them back up again because I think they're a good pair. It's just I think they had something happened. Somebody annoyed
Yeah.
the other a little bit too much
He
one
didn't
day.
take out the garbage in time when she
Yeah, he
asked,
didn't take out the
stuff like that. It's
he didn't do the dishes. I don't know. He
no. I
he left
want
his
you to
skin
want to
hanging
do the
around,
dishes.
you know.
There you go. I love it. So you mentioned crickets. Now, compared to your crested geckos, I have always heard that chewies need more protein, they need more calcium, that they can calcium crash a lot faster. What are the dietary differences that you see, and how do you go about, giving them what they need?
Yeah, I mean that's about right. They just they need more insects. They need more protein. They need more calcium. They lay very strongly shelled eggs, compared to a crusty. Like if you
Yeah.
feel, they look similar, but if you feel, it's pretty solid, the shell. Um, so they really
Closer to
need
like a
that
bird egg.
extra calcium, and we feed them in the same way that we would feed like a crested gecko with dusted and gut loaded crickets, just more of them. And I provide usually for the females in particular a little dish of the mineral calcium during
Yeah.
breeding
Yeah, I do
season
that for
so
my
that they
geckos.
can, and they'll lick it up sometimes to supplement
Hmm.
themselves. um, and then light, UVB, um, provide a like 5.0 bulb, or not bulb,
Okay.
but like a
The
strip.
strips.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the breeding, particularly for the breeding females, but they all seem to benefit. So yeah, I mean,
Do you do you give any extra heat, or do you just keep your room relatively
I
warm?
keep it relatively warm ambient. I have, we keep our gecko room is downstairs, so there's
Okay.
a decent gradient from floor to ceiling. Uh, so we can, vary, depending on how a gecko is reacting to where they are in the room. We can shuffle things around if we need to get them to be warmer or cooler. We also have like a separate um, heater in downstairs heating system so that we can heat
Yep.
the room separately from the rest of the house if we want to heat them up. But yeah, I mean, I tend to keep it between like 74 and 78 ish.
Yeah.
To
Sounds perfect
to
for them.
80 degrees at the top of the room.
Yeah. Do you ever see, especially with the UVB, any of your geckos basking? I know
Mm-hmm.
in my exoterra I've got back here, um, when I do give them the option to go and have an area where it's just a little bit warmer, they tend to take it, especially the females.
Yeah, sometimes they bask, but sometimes they also hide from the light. So
Yes.
sometimes they'll be like, no, I'm gonna go hide and not have this in my eyes while I'm asleep. And sometimes I'll turn the lights off for them if they seem to be bothered by that.
Love it. No, that's great. Um, so, what size enclosure do you recommend for a single adult and then an actual pair bonded group?
Well, I think 18 by 18 by 18 is pretty good for like just a single. We have
Okay.
a number of singles in that size. I just got recently some PVC cages that were recommended to me by another really well known Chahua breeder that are
Yeah.
16 by 18. So you can actually
Okay.
fit three of them on a baker's rack. So
Yeah.
that would be the absolute minimum size, I would say, for an adult. Um,
Are they 16, 18, 18 or 16, 18, 24?
16, 18, 8, 16, 16, 18. Um,
Oh, 16, 16, 18.
yeah, I
Okay,
think
cool.
just a little bit narrow. I think oh, they
Yeah.
might be 16, 18, 18. I need a measure. But yeah,
That's okay.
they're enough to fit on a rack that's like 48 across. But for
Yeah.
pairs, I like to keep them in 18 by 18 by 24s. But
Perfect.
I mean, you could keep them
Yeah,
in
I
bigger.
love that. Yeah.
You
You
know.
know, it's funny that I'm debating right now, and I always said, you know, on my last podcast I said I'm going to put everything in a 24 cube, right, 2 by 2 by 2. And I probably still will try that out because there's some good deals right now on a few of them. But you know, I'm using the 18, 18, 18s right now, and they're working beautifully for my geckos, even the pairs that I have together. The only thing that I have different is that Exoterra that I have that's the 18, 18, 24. And that edit height, you know, I see them use the whole thing, but do they need it? I don't know if they need it, you know, and sometimes I think that it's easier for them to avoid each other, right? And when you're trying to just have two in there,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably both at the same time,
I
right?
think it's a good. I
Um,
personally think it's a good thing because then the females, if the male's harassing them, they can go hide and get away from him.
yeah,
And the males will do that because they kind of ignore that. If the females grab it, they're like, I don't care, and
yep,
they'll sometimes, you know, pester the female, and so it's nice to give her the space to get away. But usually you see them
yep.
cuddled, not cut. I don't want to say cuddle because people are like, oh no,
But
that's competing. But
comfortable with each
with
other.
Chahua, it's a
Yeah,
little
no,
bit different. They do seem when they're pair bonded to hang out near each other.
yeah. I mean, like you said, it's one of those things where yes, they're not human beings, right? Cuddling and watching Netflix, but they do hang out in cork tubes together. You've seen it with Chahua. You've seen it with lychees for sure. I even see it sometimes less so with my gargoyle geckos. You know, it is a great sign when you see it. It is not a competition. I'm stealing your warmth. It's not like they're bearded dragons where they're trying to get to the highest spot kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's a cool dynamic, especially being a species where most of us are monogamous, right? Seeing another species that pair bonds is kind of fun to watch. So,
Yeah, it is.
but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I assume that with like crested geckos, you can get that like competition of them like try and get to the best spot, but like I haven't. I assume that's mostly with females that are living together, and I haven't really seen that with the chewies so much.
yeah. No, that's fair. So, okay, you've got crested gecko. So I want to kind of compare because we have a lot of people that watch that are crested gecko people. Um, Intelligence. We talked about that a little bit, right? Everybody says they're a little more intelligent.
Mhm.
What does that mean? What do you see? Why do you enjoy them? Like, talk to me about why do you consider them more intelligent than a crested gecko?
Yeah, it's hard to like explain exactly what it is in like a concrete way, but you'll go down there and the chewies are watching you, and they will be next to their food bowl like, come on, you're late. But the way that they recognize you, they look right into your eyes. They make eye contact. They don't seem to panic as much, and if they do panic,
Sure.
sometimes I can get them out of a panic by just making eye contact, being like, okay, you're fine, you're fine, and
Yep.
sometimes that like just
You do a
a
breathing
calm
exercise
energy, they'll pick
together.
up on
You
it.
know.
But yeah, they will scheme as well. Like there's a scheming
Ah.
energy that they have. If they see something that they want, they'll go for it. If you try to stop them, they'll try to find alternate
Yep.
ways to get there. Like, oh, do you see the chair? Like, if he were to
Oh, that's
start
awesome.
jumping for the chair back here, and I'd be like, no, no, sorry, he would probably come around the other side, sneakily and try to go to the chair where he wanted to go. They
Oh, that's
they will
awesome.
also escape their cage if you know there is a way to do
Get
so.
an
I've
opportunity.
had I don't know if you're familiar. They used to make them, but I don't think they make them anymore. These they're like shoe boxes, but really big with like a folding door or a door that folds out like that, like a
Yeah.
plastic thing.
Yep.
I've got some converted cages that are made out of those, and the front of the door sort of has like a little lift, like you sort of lift and slot it down into place. Some of these guys
Hmm.
learn that they can put their paws, brace them on the door, and like lift it and get out. So we've had to tape them, but
Wow.
only for the chewies because crusteds don't learn how to do that.
No.
Uh, but one will escape,
They're
and
just
you'll
derpy
see all
awesome.
the chewies having watched this escape, looking in the direction of the cage. You know, like it feels like they're observant. It feels like they
Okay.
learn. That's just it could just be confirmation bias, but it just seems like they definitely can tell the difference between people. They can tell a
Okay.
stranger from a non-stranger. I mean, cresteds can, I think, to
Yeah.
an extent, but I feel like
But they recognize pattern a little bit more is what I've
yeah,
kind of
I
noticed.
I think they do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's fun because to me, and again, I'm going back to my dog world, right? You get really intelligent breeds like some of the herding breeds. I have Australian Shepherds, and my grandmother breeds Golden Retrievers. And Golden Retrievers, if you look at the top 10 list, right, they're I believe, number 4 on the list, right? Well, what ranks intelligence with those animals? They actually did it on biddability, right? So how likely in how many repetitions are they going to do what you've asked them to do, right? The reason why I think Goldens do that is not because necessarily they're the most, IQ intelligent animals. They just want to please so much, right? That they'll do what you want. Where my Aussie, kind of like what you were saying with your Chewy, I think they're more intelligent. I think if you actually were able to calculate their IQ, um, because they're going to go, ooh, you told me that I can't jump out that window. So they're going to jump out the other window where the
Mm-hmm.
golden's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, well,
so
technically, I
it's
didn't do
cool.
what you.
I didn't break
Yeah, I
the
didn't break
rule.
the rules. I got around it.
Right. Sometimes the kids at school that are causing the most trouble are the smartest,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's something that's a lure for a lot of people too, because they're looking for that next level interaction with their pets. And I think you mentioned something that I want to bring up and not overlook is the calm energy. I was just listening to a podcast, the Animals at Home podcast. Guys, if you have not seen that podcast or listened to it, go. It's been going up for 6 years. It's fantastic. Um, and but I was listening to a recent episode, and he had someone on who is basically interacted with wild animals, right? And in those interactions, they're like, "How do you do that? Like, are you an animal whisperer? Are you Dr. Doolittle?" He's like, "No, I'm calm, and most people freak out, with wild animals, and they move too fast." Guys, we have wild animals in these enclosures. They're not domesticated yet, and so, you know, I think going back to that nature nurture thing, some are naturally calm, some you just have to be calm in order for them to be calm, right? And I love that you said that you can take them out of that trance by just keeping that calm energy. They feed off of you. That is really cool.
Yeah, I love seeing that. When I'm at shows, we recently vended a show, and there was a girl that came up to our booth, and was handling one of them for the first time, and her energy was she was so calm and mature that the gecko was just immediately like, okay, I love this, and sat on her for probably 20 minutes. Between
That's awesome.
her and her dad, and they just fell in love with them. They'd never heard of a Chewie before, and it's just really cool to see. Is sometimes sometimes if it's like if you're bringing a really like nervous or hyper energy, or you're scared when they touch you, yeah, they'll pick up on that and they'll get nervous too, 'cause they don't feel safe.
Well, we're
Yeah.
giants, you know.
So
I mean, we are big, scary human giants to these things. We could crush them. So if we're all, unpredictable, it's they're gonna either defend themselves or run away.
yeah.
Um, so that makes sense. All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you about kind of for someone who wants to get into Chewies, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the very first time. And maybe they love the white collar and the white on them, but they just don't have the funds right now to jump into a $2,000 gecko. You mentioned that you can buy, certain geckos and produce that potentially in the future. What advice would you give somebody? Like, what would you look for? Maybe, buying babies to me can be a little bit tough because, like you said, it takes sometimes a year, 2 years, 3 years for the Chahua gecko to really show its full potential.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of walk us through, if you were to start over today, what would you look for in a baby?
So it depends on your budget, obviously. If you're talking like low, like you're talking about, oh, if you started off with,
If you could only afford
if
babies,
you could only
and you want
afford
to get the best
babies,
babies
and
possible.
well, and some babies are quite expensive. If you could only
Yeah, I
afford
know.
affordable babies, what do you look
Sure.
for?
Under 1,000.
Yes. I look for a combination of things personally. I look for color saturation, which is hard to tell on babies, but if you know what you're looking
Okay.
for, you can tell saturated from desaturated usually. So I look for
Okay.
saturated tones, because they don't get their colors yet. When they're babies, they're just kind of browns and grays. But if you know what you're looking for, you
Right.
can you can spot like ones that are going to be colorful. And then I also look for ones that have white, at least bits of white, particularly if there's any little bits on the body that have white, that aren't the color. That's
Okay.
always something that I look for. And if they have a white collar, even if it's not very big, they can still pass on and make much bigger white collars on their babies than they have, as long as you pair them with another that has white collar. It seems to compound.
Compound. Yeah.
Not always.
S-
Sometimes you can
s-
have, a baby that comes out with no white. So it's like
mhm.
hard to predict, but I started out with geckos that had, a modest amount of white. I mean, back in like 2012, there weren't that many high white animals anyway, and I, didn't have that much to start with. And
Yeah.
and from them, I got, I held back my highest whites, bred them to other highest whites, and got,
And
higher
you've had
whites.
some
And
crazy babies.
yeah, I got
I
really lucky
so
last season. So
I want to show. Do you mind if I show that video you have on Instagram real quick?
sure. Uh,
All
yeah.
right. So I'm gonna pull that up real quick. So I stalked you a little bit before we met on here, right? So let me pull this up. Actually, let me do this first. And there we go. Excellent. Gotta love technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. So this is your Instagram page, correct?
Yes.
All right. So you've got a video here, highlights, and when I clicked on this, the baby, you got to tell me a story after we play it.
Oh man.
Guys, we're freaking out.
That is gorgeous.
Look at it.
That was a
Okay.
genuine reaction.
That
I
thing
was
was
freaking
so
out.
white. That was awesome. So I'm going to get off this for real quick. So yeah, do you still have that baby?
Yeah, it's right here actually.
Yeah, let's see it. This is exciting.
So Tiger Eye, I was just holding him the whole time. He
Yeah.
uh he and Moonstone produced this baby. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
Okay. Shows you what he can do.
Now this isn't their typical, production. Oh, You're all fired up.
Wouldn't you like that if it was?
But they produce a shockingly good number of high white collars.
Yeah, that is gorgeous.
I don't know if it's focusing so much.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
It's doing well. So, okay. So, and the white comes through whether it's focusing or not. That's how much white it has.
Well, and as you can
so,
see,
okay.
mega calm for a little baby just hanging out.
Yeah, with the father being that calm, and then that is cool. So, okay, you can mail that to me tomorrow. Would that be fun?
Sorry,
No?
I've gotta keep this one.
I could trade you a nice gargoyle gecko. No.
No, I'm so
That is
so.
awesome.
Oh, hello. I'm so stoked that we produced this, and yeah, this is about like Opal was also quite high white, but a bit more sort of less solid, I think, than this one.
Than this baby. So how old is that baby right now?
Oh gosh, I didn't look up dates, but I could look up a
roughly,
date. But
like a few months.
That was last year. That
Okay.
was probably like.
So the gecko's around a year
It's
old.
probably around a year. Yeah, I mean, no, probably a little bit less than a year. Probably more like
Okay.
3/4 of a year or something like that. But our geckos tend to grow a little slower than some people's. I don't know if it's just because we're in Washington, where we have cooler weather.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Being up here, that's why. I'm like, the ones I want to grow. I'm like, come on. If I was in Florida, this would be so much easier. I don't know what it is, but so cool. That is just. Do you have a name for that gecko?
I haven't decided on a name yet, but we name them all after gemstones.
Oh, very
so
cool.
We've got like opal and tourmaline and bismuth and pyrite and malachite and stuff.
So
we have
cool.
diamond. So yeah, I need to come up with a good one.
Very cool. Well, if anybody's got some name suggestions of different gemstones, really cool name, put them down in the comments right now. So maybe we'll pick one from there, right? So no promises. It's totally up to Sarah. All right. But, all right. So you've produced babies like that. Like, walk me through, like, anytime I hatch a baby, I'm just super excited. And when I hatch one that just exceeds my expectations, was that the first time that you've had such a crazy white one, or have you popped out a few of those?
We popped out a few of them.
Does it ever get old?
No, it never gets old. Like,
yeah.
this isn't the first high white one we've produced, but I didn't expect it out of Moonstone and Tiger Eye just because we've been breeding them almost every season. Every season that I can remember. I think we gave Moonstone like a short break, like a 1-year break once. But, I'm pretty familiar with the kind of geckos that they can produce, and sometimes they can produce some really nice animals, but this is definitely the nicest one so far.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, congratulations. I would love to produce something like that one day. So we've talked a little bit about, how you keep them. Let's talk a bit about how long does it take to actually, raise a gecko up to where it's breedable. Like, are we talking 2 years? Are we talking more?
I would say between like 2 to 3 years. I usually err more towards 2.5 to 3 years, depending on how, not only how quickly they grow, but like, just does their body seem mature? I guess because you can have a gecko that its final size or relative final size is pretty petite, even if they are eating the same amount as other geckos. Some are just naturally petite, and some are naturally big, and so you kind of have. I tend to use time more than weight in terms of maturity level and figuring out whether we're ready to pair.
I love the way you said, though, they have to look healthy enough to breathe, right? Whether they're petite and small or they're big. And that's one thing I'm learning with my geckos even is I've mentioned this a few times, but I have these girls that at a year old were over 60 grams, right? They're just behemoths. And I've had other girls where at 3 years they're at, 45, maybe 50 on a big meal day, right? So I'm not talking super tiny, but comparatively. And when my girls were 60 grams, one turned 2 already, one is just a hair under 2 years old, and the one that's a hair under 2, she laid her first set of duds, and she's just not ready to be paired. Like, I just look at her, and there's just something about her, right? She's not looking plump. She's not looking ready. I feel like I would be dooming her to a calcium crash if I put a male in with her right now. And I can't exactly tell you. I mean, weight-wise, she's still at 60 grams, right? But I just know that she's not ready. And I think that's kind of a cool thing that people don't talk about. And I just put out a breeder video and even talked about a little bit, here are the bare minimums, right? But maybe I should have mentioned that. So I think that's a cool thing you brought up.
Yeah, and it's hard to put your finger on exactly, but it's like looking at their tail, seeing if it's well fleshed, does it look like they have stores of, you know, fat,
yeah.
and do they seem like, if they lay duds, how are they after their first set of duds, yeah.
Yeah, are their hips protruding at all, spine showing, things like that. Even just the head, I can see, with her, after she laid her duds, man, her horns look amazing, right? It's like, you see a supermodel and they just, shrink down for the runway. And then I'm like, but man, I can see every bone in your body.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
So it's not
breeding
healthy.
can be hard on them, and even if you do everything right, and you have a female, and you're like, well, you seem really ready. Sometimes those, I mean, especially with Chahua, those eggs just take a lot out of them, and so you can start to see some of that wiggly tail sometimes throughout the season, even if you're supplementing them with
You're good
calcium
about
and
it.
everything. You just have to try and stay on top of it. We also have liquid calcium on hand.
Just about to ask that, yeah. So how do you administer your liquid calcium? Do you put it in their
No,
diet?
I
Do you
feed it
just
directly because
straight to them?
it's like banana flavored. So
Oh, nice.
usually just put a drop on their mouth and wait for them to start licking, and then administer the rest of it with a syringe.
That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I've put some liquid calcium in their food. Mine's not banana flavor. I might need to go and get some flavored stuff because it's interesting. If I put too much of it in the food, they won't touch it. And
That's another reason I do syringe, because I tried putting it in their food, and they're smart enough to just completely avoid the whole bowl if it's been sullied with the calcium. But also sometimes if I try to syringe feed them some calcium, they hate it, and sometimes they will, even with the banana flavor. They shake their head violently and spray you with calcium, which is fun, and then wipe their face all over your arm, just and squirt it out of their mouth, and it's like, just get a little calcium in there, please. So yes,
Right.
So it's just easier to know like how much they're getting if you're witnessing it, and if they do that, can compensate for it.
That's awesome. No, I'm just imagining that right now.
It's
great.
It's pretty funny when it happens, but also it sucks because it's sticky.
It's frustrating because you want them to actually get the calcium, right? That's the whole point. So how often do your girls, like, not a first-year female because they're sporadic, but like a seasoned Chahua female, how often is she laying eggs during a season?
Every 2 months.
And how many do you usually end up?
Roughly.
Every 2 months, okay. So around every, 60 days, 60, 70 days?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary from female to female. My husband is like like a game producer, so he's all about charts, and so he keeps like exact records on the lay dates for all of our females, and he's like, yeah, she's right on time. Like he'll note like, okay, there were, it was like 70 days between these, and your whatever it is, and
I do the exact same
yeah,
thing.
and it's
I
pretty.
like your husband already.
It's that's his strong suit and not mine. So he keeps all the
That's okay.
records, but he's really good at keeping the records. So I'm very grateful that he does that end of it for me, um, and I can
That's
do
awesome.
the more creative and esoteric breeding stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's why relationships can be fantastic. If you can support each other and make each other better, I'd be flat broke if I was, unchained. Let's put it that way. So, very cool. So about 2 months in between babies. Incubation is it any longer than the other geckos? And do you incubate them at room temperature still? How does that work?
Yeah, I don't know how long gargoyles take. I'm not familiar with gargoyles, but for ours, it's usually, um, I would say like 100, roughly is 125 days ish. Is what ours tend to end up being. But it's like between
Is
three
that
and
at room
four
temperature?
months. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say last year I incubated, and again, I'm just one small breeder, right? I only had 13 geckos last year. Last year I did everything at room temperature, and it took anywhere from on the low end 90 to, like you said, about 120 days for gargoyles. This year I made an incubator, and a breeder friend of mine recommended that I keep them at 68 to 69 degrees. I'm sorry, not
Oh,
68.
wow, that's cold.
That was bad. Yeah, really cold. No, I 78 to 79 degrees. Okay, so just a hair under 80 degrees. And I am consistently getting my babies out at like 70, 71 days. Like I had one at 69, one at 70, one at 71. And I've had, again, 10 babies hatch out pretty much on that timeline. So, and they're hatching out just the same size as my ones that I let cook at room
Yeah, I
temperature.
was
So
gonna ask, do you
I know
notice
most
any
people are
difference
worried
in
about
their
them getting smaller.
color or in their size when they hatch?
I'm getting higher quality babies this year. I don't know if it's the pairing.
Yeah,
So
it's so hard to tell sometimes
I
if that is impacting it. But I have heard sometimes that shorter incubation time can make a brighter gecko, but sort of less developed. I've heard that for crusteds.
yeah, and that's what I've heard. I've heard everything. I've got another person I've had on the podcast and become a friend of mine. I won't say who. They were saying that they're actually doing the exact opposite. They want to go and do them pretty cool, right? Low 70s, and keep it really consistent there. And they're testing that out to see if it creates, even though it's longer incubation, are they going to be bigger? Are they going to be more colorful? And so I'm like, hey, well, we'll compare. I'll speed cook mine. You go and slow cook yours, and we'll see which brisket tastes better.
I we Yeah, we tend to do like in the middle. So I'm incubating around
There you go.
between 76 and 78 degrees. But that's room
Very cool.
temperature, and it's just I put the eggs in a certain spot in the room because there is a temperature gradient,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I know that this spot is around 76. If I want to get them higher, I put them on the cage next to it that's a little bit taller, and
Nice.
it's like 78. So
Yep.
yeah, and
That's
even
awesome.
then they still take about 4 months to hatch.
Do they? Are they? Is it theorized that they're sex determinated by sec or by
No,
no, sorry, by heat,
Gilpins did
or is it just kind
the
of random?
Gilpins LAC herps have done
Yep.
some experimentation on that, and they didn't find anything conclusive. I haven't found anything conclusive one way or the other. It seems like sometimes it seems like universally everybody will be having a male heavy or female heavy year, like all the Chahua breeders.
Okay.
And I don't know what that's about. I don't know if it's just, but like some years it's like, oh man, I can't. All everything went male. I need
It's
a female. I
astronomy.
can't find any females, and everyone will be like,
Yeah.
me too. And then the next year, the opposite is true. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's any sort of any sort of reason for that, or if again it's just sort of uh,
It depends if the mom's eating salty food or sweet food. I don't know, something like
but yeah, I mean
that,
we have a
right?
pretty even spread in
Um,
general overall, and I haven't I haven't heard, like I've heard a couple people say like that they've incubated for male, but don't I haven't seen any hard evidence of that. So
Sure. Interesting. Okay, yeah. I'm just curious to see if, kind of there's a consensus, but it sounds like it's kind of all, uh, there's not necessarily a exact way of getting male
hmm
female, which is kind of nice. So you get a nice mix. Um, Now, when you have a hatchling, it takes about 3 years for them to reach maturity, maybe a little hair less. At what point are you able to sex your babies and be confident? Obviously, poor sexing.
I'm so bad at sexing because it's really hard with chewies. They can be slow growers, or not slow growers, but
Hmm.
slow showers
To
with
show the signs. Yeah.
male, if you know what I mean. So sometimes
Yep.
I'll be fooled for a long time and be like, oh, this it definitely looks, you know, female, and then bam, like they hit
There they
25,
are.
30 grams, and it's like, oh, nope, I was wrong. It's completely wrong. And I've had the opposite happen too, where I see pores, and I'm like, this is probably going to go male, and then it never develops anything, and then it starts laying eggs. And oh, it's female. But like around
Fair
30
enough.
grams, I'm like, yeah, I can pretty much tell at that point. But that is,
Okay.
that's a long time to wait. And
It's
I
a
can
very
do my
long time.
best
It
to
probably
sex.
takes, what, a year or
Yeah, I
so?
mean, I can do my best to sex an animal for somebody who's asking, but I can't necessarily
Hmm.
guarantee if they're young what it's going to be. I can just,
Okay.
I can do a best guess at my, at poor sexing, and I'm usually right, but like again, sometimes you get those surprises.
It just takes that one time you're wrong with the super loud person that
Yeah,
buys it, right?
I
That goes,
never
oh, they don't know it.
guarantee
Yeah.
unless I say guaranteed,
No.
so
Yep. Yeah. No, and it's always easier with males, I feel like, to guarantee it. Once it pops, it's there.
yeah.
It's not going anywhere. So definitely. Very cool. Um, so I just want to show off real quick and ask you about some of the geckos you have on your morph market.
Oh
Is that
yeah,
cool?
sure.
All right. So I was looking at your morph market, and one really caught my eye. There's a few that were gorgeous, but so this is your morph market page. We scroll down here. This baby. Let me jump onto your listings. So, I just want to see the. You got some beautiful uh, crested
Thank you.
geckos, but I just want to focus on
Yeah.
the chewies today. All right, so some beautiful ones here. Obviously, some great, beautiful white collars. This one, though, I don't know why. Is it unique, or it just catches my eye? Just that pale, and then I can start to see some other peaches coming through. It's really
That one's
cool.
gonna be definitely like a pastel animal for sure. Like
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a pink and a mix of like pink or peach and green, soft colors.
Okay. And now, do you base that based off the parents, or is there any signs of this baby showing that I should be looking at to kind of
In
determine
terms
that?
of the base color,
Yeah, just because again, I don't know what I'm looking at here as far as what it's going to turn
yeah,
into. I can look at a baby gargoyle and say,
usually,
okay, this is what it's going to be.
yeah, usually, so it's not an exact science, and it's easy
No,
to be
no,
wrong, but
none of
like
this is.
I've noted with you can see difference in saturation on different parts of the animal, and the
Okay,
the the grayest parts are usually going to be green, usually,
okay,
and anything that has like a little bit of warmth to it, browns in particular that have a bit of richness or like kind of
I
a
like
reddish
those.
brown, that's probably going to be red. Anything that has kind of like a bit of a sort of almost warmth to it, um, so like you get to be able to tell after hatching a bunch of them, like when they come when you look
I
at
bet.
them, It can be like, I think those areas are going to be green, and I think these areas are going to be whatever the base color is. And then slowly as it develops, you get an idea of like, okay, well, that one went orange. So I think I could probably pick out, you know, I could probably pick that out again from this pair. So I can usually
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah. Well, and I think studying other people's collections and websites has helped me kind of create the eye, right, of picking out certain babies that I think are going to be, and I'm not always right, but, I think are going to be, mind blowing when older, or just going to have a better potential of turning out to be nice geckos. Um, so let me back up on this one real quick. So you've got some adults. So this is a Pine Island pastel pink. So would it kind of have a similar base color to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
probably. I mean,
just with way more
he's
white.
pretty like fired down and desaturated. Um, I would say the
Sure,
other one is probably going to be a bit more saturated, but it is hard to tell
gotcha.
when they're that
Yeah,
young. It's a little bit easier, um, a tiny bit older, but right now I would say it's probably going to be a bit more saturated than that particular one.
got it. And would you consider, like, this one is just obviously stunning. Other than the white, you've got those darker, almost like burgundy, kind of reddish colorations coming through. Um, yeah, so like, is that what you're talking about with like the
Mm-hmm.
red coloration
Yeah, so you can
base?
see like
Okay.
parts of like there are patches of that like really burgundy sort of color, and then there are areas where it looks almost like desaturated in comparison to that, and those areas are going to probably
Yeah,
be dark green. So that stripe down the
very
back
cool.
is probably going to be dark green. There's some areas kind of like,
It reminds me almost of a striped gargoyle with
mm-hmm.
the double stripes with the
Yeah,
center.
that
Very
this one
cool.
has like two almost like white stripes on either side, which is unusual, and why, the
That would be
price on
a
this one
heck of a
is a bit higher,
project.
is because it's got like the saturation, the contrast, the body white. Yeah.
That was it as a baby.
No, that's a sibling. So
Oh,
I
that's a sibling.
mentioned Moonstone and Tiger Eye making nice babies. So that this one
Yeah,
is a Moonstone and Tiger Eye baby as well.
got it. So this is Moonstone.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Now, is this okay? I was talking to a local guy who breeds Chahua around me, and he was saying that a lot of, not a lot, but there's a good number of white collars that turn to a green collar, and you sort of mentioned that earlier. Is this what we would consider a white collar that sort of has a little green in it,
Yeah,
or is she just, it's just the photo?
I think it does have a bit of the green color, and it's something that most Chihuahua end up having, at least in terms of when they fire up. Like a lot of the time, that white will start to look a little bit gray, like when they're at their maximum fired. And sometimes people will
Sure.
be like, "What? Oh no, the white went away," and then they'll like fire down a little bit, and oh, it came back. It's always been there. It's just that anything that is going to turn green later, I feel like it sits on top
Mm,
of the white, or it can sit on top of the white. I'm not 100% sure like how it works, but when the greens come in, when they age, when they mature, sometimes it comes in and covers some of that white up a little bit, and it's hard to tell exactly
okay.
where that will come in. But some of the chewies actually have like a green collar, like neon lime green. I've seen that too.
I've seen those too. Yeah, those are definitely cool. And then this is the father, real quick. So again,
Yeah, the guy I was
I
holding
mean,
earlier.
yeah. So okay, hopefully you take this the right way. Both of these adults, I would buy easily. Right? They're gorgeous, but they're not this, right? And so that kind of shows you how you can get. I mean, were the adults looking more like their kid here when they were younger, or did they just, like you said, they can produce kind of above their weight class?
I think it's a combination. Tiger Eye was more vibrant in his youth, and I think part of that is, as they age, and he's decently older. He's He's been breeding for a while now. He's one of our first productions.
Yeah.
Um, I think maybe a 2014 or something. 2015 maybe. Um, but as they
You
age,
know what I just
they sort of
realized?
fade out a little. But also, he's so chill
Okay.
that he just never fires up. So if I were to fire him up, he would look a lot more vibrant. But yeah, as far as
He'd
the
brighten.
white is the coverage is the coverage that you see.
Do now with like gargoyle females after they start breeding, they're never going to look as good as they did at age 2 or 3 whenever you started. The males may stay colorful, and I think there's a genetic component too with certain lines that stay a little bit brighter. But for the most part, the girls take a big hit color wise. Is that the same thing with Chewies?
I think in some cases, like the reds are gonna pop the most when they're young because their greens haven't come in yet.
Hmm.
So they are fully
Okay.
clean. It's red, black, and white. It's gonna be very very clean and very stunning. And then sometimes as the greens come in, they tend to muddy a little bit.
Hmm.
So it to around 2 years old, like yeah, they're gonna look a little bit different than they're going to look as they age. But the greens can be stunning too, and you know it depends
Yeah.
because some of the
But they
green
don't
geckos look
lose
better and
their
better.
saturation just because they're breeding then.
It doesn't seem like that. No, it's just more
Okay.
like maybe a natural aging over time. I've gotten some older crested geckos
Sure.
that have gotten a little bit more pale over time. Um, but yeah, they can like Tiger. I could still fire up and look amazing. He did it, you know, a couple weeks ago, and I was like, wow, you can still do it.
Nice.
But he just doesn't.
Nice. Get them all fired up all over again to meet a new
Yeah,
girlfriend, right?
because he has these dark.
Oh,
He has
that's
like these
awesome.
dark, like black streaks that run back from his eyes, which is why he got his name. That just never show up because he doesn't fire up, but he can still fire up, and those blacks will still be there. They just when they're fired down, blacks turn green usually.
Interesting. That's so cool. Yeah, I see. I'm learning a ton right now. This is great. All right, so I want to jump to before we get too late in this podcast. You sent me a bunch of photos. We're kind of on what to look for anyway, right, with babies. And so I'm going to get off this real quick and then share the photos. And I would love for you to walk me through and tell me kind of what we want to talk about to kind of educate our listeners on what are we looking at and how can you really know what you're looking at buying, right? And when you're looking at younger geckos, we've talked about it a little bit, right? The greens come in later, looking at base color, but just let's just go through each photo and anything you want to kind of bring up with it. If you want to go to the next one, just let me know. I'll let you kind of steer
Yeah,
at this point.
sure. So this one I included because these are siblings, and
Oh wow.
I think it's really interesting because it's sort of like I don't know if you're familiar with like cats and cat genetics and stuff like that, but
A little bit.
like
I've got a
there's
Maine Coon.
dilute the dilute gene, which is essentially I assume it's similar to hypo or is hypo, where you've got a calico
Mm-hmm.
cat and then a dilute calico is going to be like blue and cream versus like orange and black. I don't know if
Right.
that's what the kind of thing that we can see with these siblings, if there's any sort of hypogene out there, because I know that with crested geckos, they only recently started talking about hypo. I think they used to call it the C2 gene. Um,
Okay.
and I don't know if there's anything like that with Chahua, but I feel like I've seen something like that with siblings that'll come out like pink and soft versus red and vibrant, but otherwise
They're just super
very
vibrant.
similar,
Yeah.
like placement of white. And you can see that they're siblings in other ways, but just the two colors are so different.
I could totally see that. I mean, you look at the one that's clearly lighter on the left, and a lot more green is coming through. However, it's still got, if you look at it, really the base color, those reds sort of just
Mm-hmm.
diluted right there. So I see where you're going with it. I like the way we're kind of analyzing this, and it'd be fun to kind of prove out. But again, there's so many colors, and there's so. I mean, they call them the mossy prehensile tailed gecko for a reason, right? The mosses and the mixture of everything, it makes it hard to see. It's not just a single color animal, or even with the gargoyles, it's easier with just stripes, or they're just like a crazy,
Yeah, it's
pattern,
chaos. Like
of all these
Wild
different
West. I
things.
don't know.
It
You know,
is.
I don't know. I'm assuming somebody has done some research into like single gene type stuff with Chahua, but I don't know of it personally. So I would love if there's
It's
anybody
okay.
that knows more. But that's just a theory, and I thought it would be cool to show these two siblings.
If someone does know more about that stuff, come on the podcast. You can be my next guest. How about that? All right. Cool. Let me jump to the next photo. These are awesome. Cool. And then you've got some lighter geckos
Yes.
here.
So this is
That the peachy in the
yes. This
top?
is
Yeah.
the pair I was
Tell me.
talking about, Opal, and then that's Landslide up top. Opal on bottom. She's fired down in that picture, but she fires up like a
Mm-hmm.
deep maroon on those areas where you can still see base color. And we produced her out of Diamond and Topaz, and Diamond
Okay.
is uh, a sibling to Tiger Eye. So um, yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
uh, we produced her, and then we purchased Landslide for his sort of his bright white, but also the beautiful like creamy ice cream base color. And we got some awesome kids from them. It was their first season last
Yeah.
season, and they think they gave us 6 babies.
Very cool. Yeah, I guess I didn't ask that earlier. Is what's the average amount of babies that you hatch out per
Six to
pairing?
eight, if you're lucky.
6 to 8. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, this one's almost that. This is the gold you were
That's
talking
the same
about?
baby I was trying to show, but it wouldn't fire up. But that's the
Yeah.
that's the baby of the two that you just showed, and it's got this
Oh,
almost
so cool.
golden color that I'm not sure if it's going
Mm-hmm.
to develop more orange, but right now it's got this really almost yellowy golden tone, and I think it's really neat.
It's so cool. It's a little golden dragon. I like it. Um, very nice. So yeah, what? Tell me about
So
this one here.
that's the same one I pulled out the really the one that I was freaking out about. Um, and this is the
Yeah.
Moonstone and Tiger Eye. And I think this one's probably going to be a dark green, like for its base color. Looking at the rest of it, it's got a little bit of areas of warmth, but mostly it looks like this sort of cool gray, and I think that's going to turn green. So we'll see.
That's so cool. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people have been buzzing about the darker chewies, right? The ones that are closer to being kind of melanistic looking. And I wonder if it's a true, black almost look, or if it's just dark green, right?
Yeah, I think they look
Don't know.
more
I have no
black
idea.
when they're young, and then they go more colorful.
Lighten out.
I have a one that's really dark, but it's like dark. It's like black, maroon, and super dark green. But I
That's
think
so cool.
Michael's working on some that stay desaturated. I'm not sure what he's got cooking over
Okay.
there, but I know that there's some people that are working on some cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's the Wild West, so we'll see what they create. So this is another kind of goldish
Yeah,
gecko
and this
here.
is from the Swirl Project as well. So this was like a
Okay.
high white that popped out from the Swirl Project. So you can see some of those swirls are there, but they're not as like pronounced as some of the other ones that we've produced from that project.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the back coloration. It's very unique looking. You do get the white collar, like you said, so not as much pattern, but I love. There are more swirl babies in the
Yeah,
slide
and
deck
I
here.
think I drew on some of them to show where the swirls are. But yeah,
Awesome.
that's a swirl. That's that's
That's a
the
swirl.
best, probably the best swirls we've produced. And actually, I have that one right here.
Nice.
It's all fired up, so it's grown since
So
that
cool.
picture.
Here, I'll get off this and let's show them.
I don't know if it'll show on camera as well as like a photo.
Sure.
Oh, you can see. You are fired up so
They can
dark.
see both. Oh, wow.
I don't know if you can see it.
Beautiful.
Fired up. You're fired up so dark.
If you cover your face with him, it usually... Yeah. There you go.
try to get the do the YouTube
The
thing.
gecko, yeah. It works, you know? It's funny, there's so many things that when you start off doing anything on YouTube, you're like, I'm never going to do that. And it's like, I kind of need to. So cool.
I don't know if you can see
Yeah,
the
he is
swirls.
fired up.
Yeah, they'll start to fire down as I handle.
He's so dark, yeah.
Because, yeah, he's...
That's so cool. Here, I'll put up
Yeah,
the
and
photos
I think,
again.
I think on the other one, I put that picture and then I, like, drew on where the swirls are. Because I was trying to explain.
Very cool. Yeah, so, yeah, here you go. Where the swirls. I like the visual. This is great. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see it without even you drawing it. And now, I believe Leaping Lychees has I forget what they call their line, but it's kind of a swirl pattern on their lychees. So it's kind of cool to see similar things on a different species with a different breeder, right?
Well, that's actually a great segue for the next
that
picture that you have there.
Oh, there you go.
Because there are tangerine. You've heard of tangerine on crusted geckos, right? Or no,
Yeah.
it was the picture you had before. You had one.
Did I go with this one?
Before that one. That one. So
Yep.
there's tangerine cream on crusted geckos. I'm sure people have heard of that. Have you heard of that sort of thing?
I've heard of Yes. Everybody says it's more beautiful in person than seen pictures, so I can't wait to see one in person.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is anything like that at all. But we popped out a couple that have like orange cream, orange collars. So if you go to the next one, you can see the progression.
So I'm going backwards with
of one that had an orange collar that we hatched. No, the other
the right
way.
I feel like I'm going back.
One forward from what you had. There
back.
we go. That one. Oh, nope. But that one too.
This one?
Both of those. The one you just had and that one.
Okay.
But yeah, you can see the color of the eggshell. So it looks like just a really bad photo, but it hatched glowing orange. Yeah. But then as it grew, the orange faded away on that one. But on the other one, if you go one to, I assume the left.
This one?
No, the other way.
To the left?
You lost it. There was another one. There we go. That one. There.
Yeah. All right. Wait. I'm gonna stop touching. I think there's a lag.
There must be a lag. There's a picture of two geckos. Okay.
Yes, there is. It's okay.
It's the same gecko, just a progression. Yep. So that one also hatched out with the
you
orange.
Can see that orangey
sort of blush on the collar, which I thought was really unusual.
That's cool.
And it's kind of stayed as it's grown, so it does still have, like, it's not as obvious, but it's got kind of an orangey look.
Well, like you said, the green sort of layers on top, and that's why I see, with the one on the right here, clearly it's the same gecko, but just I can see more green on it.
Yeah, so
that's
I don't
cool.
I don't know if that's anything, but I want to try and do see if I can get geckos that have orange cream and see if I can get it to stay. I don't know if that's possible, but that's a project I want to play with.
Well, that would be one heck of a project. Yeah, if you can go and create a orange collar Chewie, that would be phenomenal. I would love that. Yeah. So, and you could charge a pretty penny for those things because I think people would like.
Yeah, I have no idea how it's going to work out, or if I'm just seeing something that isn't there. But I want to try and see if it works.
There's no recipe for these things, right? And that, like you said, it's the Wild West. So at this point, do whatever looks cool to you and have fun with it, right? And if something pops out and we can prove it out, great. If it doesn't, you still got some fantastic geckos.
Thanks.
So it's a win-win in my book. Any other ones we want to show real quick before I wrap this part up?
I don't remember all. I don't
a
remember
beautiful
what all I
crested
sent to you.
gecko here.
Oh, that's our empty bag project.
Oh, very nice. Okay, I got to admit here, and guys, don't cancel me for this, okay? Empty back confuses the living daylights out of me. I've seen the Gecko Pods, empty back episode. Like, I get full empty backs. This looks beautiful as a full empty back, right?
Yeah, I mean,
This one
I
here?
got her in like 2012 or 2013 before there were a lot of people talking
So
about
you've
empty
had it.
back stuff. So I didn't really,
Yeah.
I thought she was amazing, and I was like, I have to make more like this. So I guess she would be a super empty back, I would imagine. I mean, from
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining. The het empty backs or whatever it is, they still got stuff in the middle, and I'm just like, it confuses
yeah, I
me.
think it's
But I'm a
it's
simplistic
supposedly codominant or not codominant, incomplete dominant gene.
Yep.
So if you have an empty back and a super
Yeah,
empty
super
back,
form.
theoretically you should be producing about half supers from that, like but
Sure.
it's
Got to do your
yeah.
Punnett squares.
I I haven't bred them enough to like really solidify like the pattern because I have a couple that have been I'm like this is definitely a super empty back and then I just don't get any supers and I'm like okay well maybe it's a phantom that is really really dark
Yeah.
and I thought it was a super but it's just so it's I think it's hard to it's hard to understand what's happening sometimes because it's a fuzzy line.
Right. No, and I think that's the fun part about some of these geckos, and everything's so brand new, and we're all trying to figure it out, so it can be really confusing, especially as you're coming in. That's why we'd have these conversations so we can all learn from each other. Very cool. And then I think you had this gecko. Anything super fun you want to chat about with this one?
Oh, that's the same one. That's the same. That's the same or
Same
one
as
as
before?
the golden sort of one.
And then we talked about this guy here
Yeah,
who you
she's
got up
on
for sale.
market.
Very cool. And these are gorgeous.
Oh yeah, so those are all
So
siblings.
yeah, I mean the one up top, these are all siblings. Yeah, and you can look at the variety of that, from darkest to lightest. And so if I was looking at these, okay, let's play a little game here because you got 3 siblings here, right? Same parents, same lineage. If I was to pick one, right, and you're gonna try to say, okay, which one would you say is the best out of the 3? I'm gonna try to use what I got from this conversation and pick one. Initially, my eye goes straight to the one up top, just because it probably has a darker base with the contrast. But looking at all the colors, they're all pretty similar. I don't know. I kind of like. Ooh, you know what? I kind of like the one in the middle for the white banding bars. I don't know. That's kind of stood out to me. Which one would you say would be the if you had to only pick one of these? Which one would you say is your highest end?
I've held them all back because I can't decide. But
Right.
I think
putting you
it
on the
depends
spot.
on again. It depends on your breeding goals because the one on the top has
Fair,
the most
yeah.
white. So if you're going for white and
Okay.
contrast, probably the top one. If you're going for color saturation,
Yeah.
probably the bottom one because in person, that one glows. It's super bright. It has less
Interesting.
of that dark over it, and so the base just is super vibrant.
Shows.
But yeah, I would. It's hard to say because like the middle one is kind of a nice mix of both. But
Mm-hmm.
the top one has a bit more of a solid white collar and
Yeah, that top one caught my eye initially. So very cool. Yeah, you can't go
yeah.
wrong with any.
I would say
so,
probably
yeah.
top or bottom, depending on your goals.
That's awesome. Love it. And then obviously Xanthics, and then there's my gecko. Cool. All right, let me jump off this real quick. This is awesome. Well, I feel like I kind of know a little bit more about Chahua at this point. Um, is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Any other things that we didn't cover today that people who are interested in getting a Chahua should probably consider?
Things that we haven't covered. Well, we've covered they do have higher protein and calcium requirements, and their cage
Yep.
size. They love cork bark. That's great for them. Cork bark flats and tubes. They love them. They do well in either artificial or fully bioactive. I'll say I know a lot of people have sort of not realized that their gecko has laid eggs if they keep them in a bioactive, so that's something to be aware of. But chewies,
Yep.
um, they do glue their eggs to stuff, so that is something I would say to keep in mind. We have to remove certain things from their enclosure to prevent them from sticking their eggs to them when it's close to time, because it's really hard to get them off of like a plastic hide, for example. So I would say,
Sure.
just be aware that they do kind of glue their eggs to surfaces rather than burying them. So they're not usually going to bury their eggs. Um, and
Interesting.
uh,
So what other so like plastic enclosures? What other things do you take out? Do you leave the cork bark in there?
yeah, but
Obviously.
if there's like a really if there's a really long and say slender cork bark tube, I do take those out, because
Yep.
if they laid in the middle of that, and that's happened before, you have to saw the whole thing open, and then like it's like a procedure, like you're doing
Carefully
surgery in
pry.
there, and I don't I prefer not to have to do that, so I tend to just keep an eye out for when they're about to lay, and some signs that they're about to lay for us is that the females will start like walking on
Mm.
the ceiling of their enclosure.
Oh,
You
okay.
can really see the eggs inside from their belly. You can usually see the two
Takes the
eggs.
pressure off.
But yeah, they'll start acting like a little uncomfortable, hanging upside down a little bit, like they're trying, as if they're trying to get comfortable. Um, so yeah, we just keep an eye on them, and we keep records to try and know when they're going to lay, so we can take things out of their enclosure that we don't want them to glue their eggs to.
Very cool. Have you ever experienced where you maybe lost eggs because you were trying to remove them, and I know they have harder shells, but I could imagine myself like accidentally making some scrambled eggs trying to peel them off.
I've been pretty lucky there that I haven't totally ruined any eggs, but there it is always easier for bacteria to get in if you make a micro tear, and so there I think there was one that maybe had failed because like the edge that was glued to glass maybe was a little thinner.
Hmm.
But the one that I can think of that it wasn't my fault, Gecko laid her egg in the food dish, and that was
Oh
good, and
no.
it went bad, and I was so sad because it was Opal's egg, and I was like, no, these are
Oh no.
precious. Why would you do this? Lay it right in the food dish. So yeah, that happened. So
Yeah, trying to feed her babies too soon. No, that's fair. Oh, yeah, the gluing is got to be so different because so many breeders use lay boxes and things like that. I'm assuming they don't even use lay
I mean, you can,
boxes,
but
even if they offer.
I never have my females use them. Like they may as well just not be
Right.
there. They Oh, and they
Fair enough.
guard their eggs. I will say. I don't know if you've heard that, but they will guard their eggs, and that is an easy way to tell that they have laid. Is they will suddenly turn bitey.
Okay, fair enough. And so, do you just throw on a glove,
I
or how do you
usually,
go
I mean,
about getting
you can
around that?
distract them and then take the eggs while they're distracted, like by feeding them a cricket,
Okay.
or sometimes I'll use like a paper towel roll, and I'll just kind of get their front end, in the paper towel roll, and then
Yep.
I can do things, and they're not going to hurt themselves or
The
try to
gecko
bite
muzzle.
you while you're working in there.
Sure.
But yeah, it's
Have you
oh
ever been
yeah,
bitten?
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Males can be territorial sometimes. So, but what's great is
Yeah.
like even the worst ones, and I only have like a couple that are reliably territorial. Like
That
it's like a light
grouchy.
switch once they're out of their cage. It's like they completely
Hmm.
change personality. you can you can do whatever and they're
That's
fine,
cool.
but it's when they're guarding their cage that they can be a little scary sometimes. Just a couple of them. Most of them
Yeah.
aren't, but yeah, it can happen.
How bad is a bite?
It can be. I mean, it you know, I don't know about Gargs. I've heard
It's
that
not
Garg
fun.
bites can be surprisingly bad, but like I can bleed for sure.
Knock on wood, never
Oh
been bit.
really? Oh yeah, Chewies.
I've only been doing it for a few years, so give me time.
It's bad more when they pull. Like if they bite and
Oh
then
yeah.
rip backwards, that sucks. But yeah, so it can happen, but usually it's it's more just like to scare you. But yeah, they can bite.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of.
Okay. No. Fair enough. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I don't have lychees is I'm a big chicken.
But usually you can
So
tell right away when they're in a mood. They just have this look, and I
yep.
can't even explain it because they don't have expressions. But you can tell.
Oh, I totally know what you're talking about. I mean, other than obviously the gaping, that they're upset. But when a few of my geckos, even some of the most chill gargoyles I have, when they are just not having it and they're a little bit upset, um, I know when to put them back. I try to keep them out a little bit out of their comfort zone so they don't go to that as, hey, I just want to go back, so I'm going to go this way. I don't want to condition bad behavior. But yeah, you pick up on cues. The more you spend time with your animals, guys, the more you can really understand what they're feeling, thinking. Right? It's almost like a six, like it's an extra sense,
Yeah, you
right?
learn their body language.
It's that
You
connection.
know, um,
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
Chewie that's defending, because oftentimes they will ask to come out. It's very cute. And they will look at you with the same kind of intensity that they have when they're feeling defensive, but it's different because one is kind of friendly and they're putting their hands on the glass and they're sort of watching you and moving around, but the ones that are like defending will like stare right into your eyes and just
Hmm.
look at you like don't do it. Don't you even
Don't
try.
you try.
And you can just tell.
that That's awesome. If you have any video footage of a cute Chewy kind of like begging to come out, please send it and I'll post it right here. Okay.
Yeah, do you want to come out? Here you go. Here we go. You want to come out? Yeah?
Good
What do you
thunder
think?
egg.
Oh,
Good job.
yeah. Come on out.
Good job.
Yeah. You want some shoulder time? Okay. You can be on my shoulder. Here you go.
Awesome. So I just imagine kind of like a bearded dragon. You ever
I
owned a bearded
haven't.
dragon before?
No.
So they're another animal that I think is relatively intelligent, not a genius, but they don't get enough credit for some of their intelligence. And you know, even when I used to work at a pet store, that's what kind of got me. There's this one dragon that just would every time I walked by would kind of perk up and come to the front of the glass. And when I owned one, it would do the same thing when they wanted to come out. And it just it's that extra connection you have, with certain intelligent species where I don't think I've had a single Garg ask me to come
Oh,
out.
interesting.
I can't think of one.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
only just
so
started with
there's a
Gark,
difference
so
there.
I have three now.
Well, let's chat about that real quick. I know we've been going for quite a while, but so we had chatted, I think, initially because I had a gargoyle for sale, right? And you just ended up picking up a male
Yeah,
recently, didn't you?
sorry. Yeah, I'm
So
like super picky, which is why it's taking me this long.
no, hey, I'm the exact same way, and it worked out because I actually ended up selling that one and getting the female I
Oh,
picked up
nice.
from Eclipse Exotic. So everything happens for a reason, and you get exactly what you want. And I think that's the best thing. So don't feel bad one bit whatsoever. You don't have to buy from me. But just one of the reasons we chatted, and I think it's gorgeous. I love how it truly looks like a true retic. Some of the reticulated blotches, you can see the stripe influence, and I didn't see that in your
Yeah,
mail.
I that was something that I was like, I really wanted orange, not red, not orange red,
Yep.
orange, like fire Cheeto orange, and I wanted banded blotch. So like, but the band's going horizontally. Oh, not the stripe.
Yep.
And it's got that
And you
Charlie
got
Brown
it.
kind of like chevron pattern, and I was like, this is and all that orange. I was like, I have to get this one.
That's so cool. Do you mind if I ask where you got them from?
Vertopia. So yeah.
Oh, great place to get
Yeah,
it.
and I have two
Very
females.
cool.
One is going a little bit more red, but is a really cool skeleton blotch with high color, and then
Very nice.
another orange that I got from Zeke's Geeky Geckos. They're local.
Cool. Very nice. Yeah, I it's kind of fun. I'm excited to talk to you more, after you've been working with the breeding project a little bit more, just to see what you think is the difference between the two species, the biggest difference. Obviously, we've talked about, I think intelligence is probably one that you're going to notice right away. They're not nearly as smart, but, they all have their pros and cons. I always say with gargoyles or, versus chewies, I think gargoyles are calmer. I know some people disagree with me there. But from what I hear, and I could be completely wrong, I always hear that chewies are calmer than gargoyles, or they can be. And seeing the gargoyle that you had on your shoulder for the whole time, I'm like, yep,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
it could be varying from collection to collection, but the gargs I have, the two females are all over the place, super jumpy, and then most of my chewies are like that. So I think chewies are calmer,
Nice.
but I don't have nearly as much garg experience to say. And also, babies are generally jumpier.
No,
So
they are. Yeah, and I think, like you said, hand taming them a little bit when they're younger, getting them used to it. I've sold a few babies where, I've gotten feedback that, like, man, your babies are the calmest things I've ever seen. And, they're super healthy and big, but they'll let me handle them for a lot longer than my other geckos. And I think that's just because I handle them from a very young age, and I don't have a huge collection, so I have the time to do so. Just like when you're socializing a puppy, right? If they're used to it from a very young age, it's easier. If all I do is throw in some crickets every so often, and just shut the door, they have no idea what a
that's
human
exactly
being
why
is.
we
So,
keep our collection
kind of
small. It's easier to manage, and also you get to have individual time with every animal in your collection. Like that way you get to enjoy
Yep,
keeping them.
exactly. Right. Yeah, and especially if it's your job and this is what you do full time, then you can't. You have to have the quantity. But for the majority of us that are in this hobby, this is exactly that. It's a hobby, and so you can invest in higher quality animals, and you can invest your time as well. And I think that's awesome. I love what you're doing. I think you've got some of the best Chahua that I've seen, out
Thank
there. I've definitely been just looking at your page and checking out your morph market and going, man, I wish I won the lottery. And you've got some really reasonable stuff too, but it's just, it's one of those things where I have really expensive taste, and so like that $13,000 gecko looks amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like those geckos are, a 10 years of investment of our breeding, project culminating in those highest end ones, So if you want to skip the wait.
Yeah, no, and
yeah.
Exactly, right? I'll just fast forward 10 years, and that's how you do it. That's awesome. And okay, let me ask you this while we're on that topic. How long do geckos that cost, more than $3,000-$4,000 usually tend to sit? I know that can depend on the market, that can depend on the how many buyers are out there right now. But, Is there some turnover? Like, is that something that sells every so
It
often?
hasn't been great in this last year, I would say, but I would say across the
Yeah,
board
for a lot of us.
that people have
Hmm.
found that to be the case. I had a lot more sales on the high end, like around in COVID times. Um, but
Yep.
yeah, now they're sitting a bit, but I still believe in their quality, so I'm okay with
Sure.
letting them sit a little because I have a small collection.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of up and down depending on the year, on whether people are doing a lot of importing because some of my best animals were exported from the U.S. to other countries. So yeah,
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you said, you don't have to, which is great. So you can kind of dictate, what your prices are and all that. Um, but I guess the reason why I'm asking is like even with gargoyles, right? Some of the higher end stuff that I see, it sits there for a little longer, but it does
hmm
eventually sell, right? It's just not, the $200 gecko is going to
yeah.
go
The the
ahead.
low
And
end
there are some
is
higher
easier to
end stuff.
move, and it's kind of that middle area that's honestly a little bit more difficult because people either are like, I want the best of the
Hmm.
best, or I want it to be under $500, and so it's that middle, but
Correct.
like the middle area, people sleep on it. That's where you can get like, you know, pretty good
The
breeders
best bang
that
for your
you can
buck.
produce high white geckos from if you have patience.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I'll ask you one last question then before we wrap up. Um, with so many great Chahua breeders, and obviously I think you're in that category. Um, who are the people that inspire you to keep going with your Chahua? If
Oh,
you could give a shout
yeah.
out to a few, maybe one up and coming person,
I mean,
and then some people that
Darnell
inspired you
Darnell
initially.
James has been just like he's a friend, and also his chewies are incredible. Aaron Hershey with ET Geckos, LAC Herps are absolute inspirations in not only just how long they've been doing this and all of their all of the geckos that they've produced, but like their experimentation and their creating whole systems for their rooms out of Andrew's so handy, and I cannot fathom how one even conceives of making a whole like watering system from scratch. Yeah,
He's also honestly one of the most down to earth people. When I go to Tinley, I'll sit there for 10, 15 minutes and just chat with him, and he doesn't know who I am. I'm nobody, but he doesn't care. He'll sit and chat with me, and we'll talk about different things. And honestly, it was just you could tell how genuine they
they're
are.
great. I
As a couple, and it's
Yeah,
just
they're
gecko people.
fantastic. They've always been so kind to me. And yeah, and get Ghana days,
Very cool.
great folks. Yeah, yeah. The
Absolutely.
Chewy community is a little smaller, but I think we're like a chill little group.
Love it. Awesome. Sarah, I've had a blast chatting with you, and we could probably keep talking for a really long time, because I'm really loving to dive into the Chewy world. I hope that I can get a baby soon, and one that I'm really excited about, growing out and breeding, not just something that is even a pet, because that was my initial thought. Now I really want to get
Yay!
into Chewies. So thank you for letting me dip my toe with
Absolutely.
some knowledge, and this is not the last you'll see of me, but thank you so much for coming on. Where can people, if they want to reach out to you and maybe talk to you about geckos, or get one of your amazing chewies, or crested geckos, where can people
I'm
find
on
you?
Instagram, Rainy Day Geckos on Instagram. I am also on Facebook, Rainy Day Geckos on Facebook. I'm on Morph Market. And I do have a website. It's not good to necessarily contact me through the website, but I do have rainydaygeckos.com. I just haven't updated it in forever because I'm lazy and I focused mostly on Morph Market this last year. But eventually I'll probably update that with like everything available at some point when I have time.
Awesome.
But yeah, Instagram is probably the most reliable to reach out because sometimes Facebook business can be a little weird. But yeah.
It is weird. Yeah. No, I was always a Facebook guy until I got into geckos. Now I'm full on Instagram. So totally with you there. Well, again, thank you so much. Hopefully you had fun, and we will see
thank you for
next time.
inviting
So
me.
thank you so much.
I had a great time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for watching this episode. Please do me a big favor. Like, subscribe, share this with somebody, especially if they're into Chewies. And, again, remember, go down in the comments. What is your favorite gemstone?
Yes.
Maybe we'll name the baby after that.
Help me come up with a name. I have
Inspiration.
to name everything.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and want to encourage me to make more Gargoyle Gecko content, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, share this with a friend, and maybe check out one of the videos right over there. I'll see you next time on Gecko Cove.